Look at any world map from the 16th, 17th, or 18th century, and you'll notice something curious. Across the vast expanse of Central Asia, you'll find a name that appears again and again: Tartaria, sometimes spelled Tartary, a massive region stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, from Siberia to the borders of China. But here's what makes this fascinating. Tartaria wasn't a unified empire in the way we typically understand nation-states. Yet its cities, places like Samarkand, Bukhara, and Karakoram, remained fixtures on European maps for centuries, long after the Mongol Empire had fractured and the Silk Road's golden age had passed. The question is simple: why? Why did these cities endure in the European imagination when so much else about this region remained shrouded in mystery? Act 1. The Cartographic Puzzle. To understand this mystery, we need to travel back to Renaissance Europe. It's the 1500s. European cartographers are in the business of mapping a world they've barely seen. For regions like Central Asia, they're working with fragments, merchant accounts, ancient texts, travelers' tales, and rumors passed along the Silk Road. The term Tartaria itself comes from Tartar, referring to various Turkic and Mongol peoples. Europeans used it as a catch-all term for the vast, largely unknown interior of Asia. It was a geographic convenience, a way to label the unmappable. But the cities were different. Unlike the vague boundaries of Tartaria itself, cities like Samarkand had substance, they had history. They had names that appeared in multiple sources, corroborating each other across centuries. When Marco Polo described his travels in the late 1200s, he mentioned specific cities. When Arab geographers wrote their treatises, they documented trade routes with named destinations. When Chinese dynastic records noted tributary states and trading partners, certain cities appeared again and again. This repetition created cartographic credibility. If 5 different sources from 5 different cultures all mention Samarkand, a map maker in Amsterdam or Venice could reasonably conclude this place exists and it matters. And so these cities became anchor points, fixed stars in an otherwise uncertain geography. Act 2. The Silk Road's Legacy. But why these cities specifically? Why did Samarkand, Bukhara, and Karakoram endure on maps, while countless other settlements faded into obscurity? The answer lies in the Silk Road, not just as a trade route, but as an information highway. Picture Samarkand in its prime. It's the early 1400s, during the reign of Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane. The city is a jewel of Central Asia. Its Registan Square will one day be surrounded by madrasas covered in turquoise tiles. Scholars, merchants, artisans, and astronomers gather here. Caravans arrive carrying silk from China, spices from India, and gold from distant lands. Samarkand wasn't just a city, it was a crossroads of civilizations, and crossroads get remembered. The same was true for Bukhara, another Silk Road oasis city. By the 16th century, Bukhara had become a center of Islamic learning, producing scholars whose works traveled far beyond Central Asia. The city's reputation as a noble city reached Europe through diplomatic contacts and merchant networks. These weren't random outposts, they were nodes of connectivity, places where East met West, where information was exchanged, where the flow of goods meant a flow of knowledge. And then there's Karakoram, the ancient capital of the Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan and his successors. By the 1500s, it was already in decline, abandoned in favor of Beijing. Yet it remained on European maps for centuries afterward. Why? Because the Mongol Empire had traumatized Europe. The memory of Mongol invasions in the 13th century was still vivid. Karakoram represented something Europeans couldn't forget: the origin point of the most devastating military force they'd ever encountered. Memory, it turns out, has geographic weight. Act 3. Map-making in the Age of Uncertainty. Now, we need to understand something crucial about early modern map-making. It wasn't just about accuracy, it was about authority. A map covered in empty space looked incomplete, unfinished. A blank interior suggested ignorance. but a map filled with names, cities, regions, rivers, projected knowledge, even if that knowledge was second-hand or outdated. European cartographers faced a dilemma when mapping Central Asia. They had limited direct information. Very few Europeans had actually traveled there and returned to tell the tale. So map makers did what any professional would do when facing incomplete data. They relied on the most credible sources available and repeated information that had been verified across multiple accounts. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara appeared in Marco Polo's travels from the 1290s, the accounts of William of Rubruck, who visited the Mongol court in the 1250s, Arab and Persian geographic texts that European scholars translated, reports from diplomatic missions to various Central Asian khanates, letters and accounts from merchants trading along remnants of the Silk Road. This multi-source verification gave these cities staying power. Once a city appeared on an authoritative map, say one published by the Ortelius family or the Blauw family, famous Dutch cartographers, it tended to be copied by subsequent mapmakers. Map-making in this era was cumulative. New maps built upon old ones. Errors were perpetuated, but so were verified facts. The cities of Tartaria, having earned their place through repeated mention, became permanent features. There's another factor: exotic appeal. Maps weren't just tools for navigation, they were objects of wonder, often commissioned by wealthy patrons who wanted to display their worldliness. A map labeled with mysterious cities like Samarkand or Khiva added to that sense of wonder. The cities of Tartaria occupied a perfect middle ground, exotic enough to fascinate, credible enough to include.